If you're someone who's looking to bring a competitive mindset into your career, learn more about the lore of fencing, or a fencing parent who wants to do a great job raising the young fencer, then this episode's for you.
Oh, I didn't see you there. Thanks, Prieur, for supporting us on this show. Without your help, we wouldn't be able to have amazing episodes just like this one.
Welcome back, Ari.
We made it.
We made it. That last one got a little hairy, but we stuck the landing, and now we're here.
Yeah, I'd say it's a 10 out of 10 stick. And now we have a guest that we haven't known as long as our previous guest, but one that I would say, at least my interactions with, have been quite impactful thus far over the past year. And I'm really excited to get his story. How do you feel overall about our journey here to episode 8 or 9, I believe?
I believe it's 9. It's funny. After each one of these, I keep thinking back and going like, oh, this is something I would have liked to ask this person, or I would have liked to, hear about this and different aspects. So a lot of our guests I'd like to have on again. But again, just having a blast doing these. Like, these are really good conversations, good takeaways from them as an athlete, as somebody who has aspirations, like little tidbits from the mentalities, and just cool stories too. So it's all about the stories.
I'd say the same. It's really awesome just to see how similar we all are, yet the things that make the people that we've interviewed distinct and unique individuals, and what separates them from us, from other high-level fencers, from average-level fencers, and just from other people, the it factor per se. And today's guest lacks none of that. And let's read over a couple of...
Just got to say, this is the most extensive resume we've had so far.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Because I'm old.
Oh, it's because he's old. Okay, there we go. So just to list a few of the things that our current guest has accomplished both on and off the strip, we have the 1991 foil NCAA champion, 1993 épée NCAA champion. He's the second fencer ever to win NCAA championships in 2 different weapons. In 1993 and 1996, men's épée senior national champion, a 3-time U.S. World Championship team member, twice in épée, once in foil, an 8-time team national champion, 3 times in foil, 5 times in épée for New York Athletic Club. And during the 1996 season, he was the number 1 ranked men's épéist in the USA. He's a double Columbia grad, undergraduate and Columbia Law School. He's a real estate entrepreneur and CEO of Zenith iOS, a former VP at Vernado Realty Trust, and founder of Abingdon Square Partners, a real estate development firm. And he has led $1 billion+ in property investments and teaches at Columbia as well as NYU Stern. Welcome, Ben Atkins.
Thank you for having me.
Woo! All right.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, it gets natural from here on out. Well, I'd say that usually, and including today, the way that we kick this off, outside of making you feel uncomfortable by just reading off your resume to a group of cameras, we love to hear about who you are, and that starts at the roots. Tell us a little bit about where you're from, and I would say how you got started in fencing, and just a little bit of the earlier side of the Ben Atkins story.
Sure. I actually grew up about 20 blocks away from here. So I grew up in Greenwich Village in the 1970s. Very different time in New York City. My dad was a sculptor and a psychiatrist. My mom was a psychoanalyst. So it was kind of a bohemian New York City upbringing. My father did not. I started fencing because of my father. My father wasn't a fencer, but he had a friend who fenced at college at Rutgers. And one day we were going by a fencing club in New York, in Greenwich Village. We saw some people hitting each other with swords. We went in. My dad had always liked fencing from his college roommate. he spoke to the coach there, asked him if he would coach me. I was only 6 years old. The coach said no, I was too young. My dad kind of impressed upon him to give me a shot, and he ultimately agreed. And it was really just blind, dumb luck that coach, Miklos Bartha, was one of the great legendary coaches of young foil fencers in the United States. He produced a whole slew of Olympic fencers, Cliff Bayer, Zadok Longenbach, Peter Devine, as well as a number of like NCAA champions, Ed Maffel, and he became a second father to me. So it was really just random, but it was my father who ultimately was the one who got me into fencing.
That's
and
awesome.
supported me in the earlier years.
Oh, that's great.
It's great. I like falling into it is I look at it as like the luckiest thing that's happened to me is just, you know, falling into fencing kind of thing. It's life changing, and it's good to hear like another origin story like that. You know, we've had a couple guests now where it's runs in the family, but thankful that you ran into it when you were 6 years old.
Yeah, it was one of the great blessings of my life.
That's awesome. I think Steven is probably, maybe we had a few other guests, but Steven's one of the people of the Direct Elimination now ecosystem that also just kind of stumbled into fencing, and he's still living and breathing it to this day. I mean, everyone sort of stumbles into it, but like I had a friend who did it because of a stepfather, and that's how I ended up there. But it's awesome when it's just one of those serendipitous pieces of chance, and you know, just where you had to be.
It was crazy in the early days because I was the youngest person at the club by 10 or 15 years. So I was fencing in my early youth, by the time I was 10 or 11, with some folks that are names you may not even know, but these are Hall of Fame fencers, Ed Ballinger, Ed Wright, like legendary fencers from the 70s and 80s on multiple Olympic teams. And these were the guys that I kind of really looked up to. They were in their 30s and 40s. I was a little kid, but I didn't really have any peers until I got to my teen years.
Yeah. Tell us about, if you can, about the club that you started at. I think you were telling me a little bit about it earlier. It's a club that no longer exists today, but has a storied past.
Yes. Sal Santelli was run for many years by the legendary Italian fencing master, Giorgio Santelli. Had came from Italy, one of really the great U.S. coaches, maybe ever, but certainly of his era. And he had that club for many years. He had one in New York, one in New Jersey. And the one in New York was one of the preeminent New York foil clubs for 20 or 30 years.
Wow. So
Closed about 15, 20 years ago.
So you start fencing, 6 years old, training up, fencing adults, presumably, or, you know, teenagers. What was that sort of early youth fencing journey like? I'm assuming the youth fencing scene back then was a little bit different than it is today. Were there opportunities to compete? What were those opportunities like? And what was your sort of progression like between starting and maybe college or cadet juniors, anything like that?
It was certainly much less formal than it is today, and a lot smaller and a lot less intense. So in the early days, the pre-cadet was all, there weren't even really RYCs or large regional tournaments. So there were a lot of local tournaments and kind of small regional tournaments. So you'd have one of the clubs, the Fencers Club, a club in New Jersey, you know, those types of clubs would have tournaments where they maybe have 20 to 40 kids in an age category. So I did a bunch of those. I think I started going to my first national competitions, Junior Olympics. At the time, they didn't really have cadet or younger age NACs. So there was the Junior Olympics at junior and cadet. And I started going to those when I was maybe 11. And when I was 12, I had my first big result, which was they didn't have, before they had cadet, they had under 16. And then it became cadet. And I took second in the under 16s in foil. And that actually qualified me for the U.S. Olympic Festival, which for the first time that year as an experiment, they took the top two finishers at the under 16 Junior Olympics. And so I went off to the U.S. Olympic Festival at age 12. Again, everyone must have been 10 years older than me. I was on a team with Greg Macialis, Peter Lewison, who was another Olympian. And it was a huge eye-opening experience for me. I didn't know anybody. I was a young, hot-headed kid from New York, but that was my first real exposure to the kind of national scene. And then from there, I started going to all the junior and cadet competitions and met a lot of people and developed a huge friend network, some of whom I'm still friends with to this day.
That's awesome. The U.S. Olympic Festival, that's something that no longer exists.
It was a great tournament. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That's something that I've heard about.
They had great uniforms, too.
That really,
awesome,
red, white, and blue, awesome stuff.
Just different, all sorts of different things. I had them for years, those uniforms.
What a shame. Well, maybe we could petition to get it reinstated.
I don't know why they did away with that competition. It was a lot of fun. Everyone looked forward to it. Everyone went in the summertime. It was they didn't used to have summer nationals. Nationals actually used to be earlier, so that was kind of the big, low-stress competition.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Summertime.
That's awesome. So we're going to talk a little bit about the later parts of your journey in fencing, but since this is a story, we'd like to keep it somewhat chronological. Sometime between that 12-year-old kid and that Olympic festival where you had this, eye-opening experience, and you chasing an Olympic dream, there was some moment where you had this, I'm going to be pushing myself in this sport. This is where I want to really see how far I can push myself. Eureka moment, this all-in moment that we love asking our guests about. And if you remember, if not, it's fine. But if you remember, do you mind sharing what you believe to be your all-in moment where it was kind of, I want to be the best at this?
That's an interesting question. I can remember very strongly one of the biggest decisions I had to make that was one of the hardest decisions I had ever made in my life to that point, which was I was probably 14 or 15, and Santelli at the time, my peer group was hadn't yet come up in fencing, and I was feeling that I maybe was not going to get exposure to the level of competition that I wanted to really take my fencing to the next level. And my coach, who was a father figure to me, had always told me that if he ever retired, if anything happened to him, there was only one person that he wanted me to work with, which was Dr. Aladar Kogler. And he was coaching at the time at the Fencers Club and the New York Athletic Club. And at a certain point, I made the decision that I wanted to take lessons with Dr. Kogler, and that he was going to be the person that I felt could really help me reach my potential in my fencing career. So I went to him and asked him if he would coach me, and he told me that he would not until I first spoke to Mr. Bartha and explained to him that I was going to be leaving. And so I had to go to Mr. Bartha, and I took him out to dinner. My father came with me. I was 14 or 15, and I had to tell him I was his prize student. I had been with him since I was 6 years old, and I had to tell him that I was going to switch coaches. And that was an incredibly difficult thing for me. I mean, I viewed him as a family member, but I felt at that point, I already knew at that point that I had aspirations to reach, the Olympic level, and I just felt that Aladar was the person that could really help me do that. So I remember that very clearly as something that was already, even at that age, I was having to make really difficult decisions that, normal 14-year-olds may not have to make, hard emotional decisions.
That's a tough conversation to have.
It was, he didn't speak to me for many years afterwards. And ultimately we reconciled it, but it was very hard for him. It was, I believe, for me, it was the right decision. And I went on to have an incredible relationship with Aladar. I mean, I could talk about Aladar for hours and hours and hours, but it was definitely the right thing for me to do, but that doesn't make it any less hard, and it wasn't any less difficult for him. or me.
Yeah, it's a lot of accountability and responsibility at a young age, and it's something that you definitely had to follow through on in order to make it be the right decision.
Yeah.
So kudos to young Ben.
It was, one of those life pivots that sometime happen, and they can take you in one direction or the next. And when you do them, you don't know how they're going to turn out, but you look back on them now, and you can look back at them with a little bit of the history behind you and kind of judge them. And I think that I'm glad I made that decision, even if it was hard.
I'm sure that primed you for other moments in your life where you'd have to make challenging decisions.
100%, yes. And kind of a lot of the pivotal moments for me in fencing that really pushed me and pushed my resolve were, I think, losses more than wins. That make sense.
No,
I
absolutely.
have certain losses that were really pivotal to me that I can talk about that were definitely things that made me want to commit to taking things to the next level.
Yeah, I think we can relate to that.
Yeah, we spoke about that with Nikita. It's just sometimes you ride a high and you're where you want to be, but you sort of rest on your laurels a bit. Maybe you don't approach training as intensely, or maybe you don't approach the competition the same way, and you sort of need those losses as like a reality check to sort of bounce you back. And that finding that inspiration in those losses and being able to come back from them is a powerful tool for a lot of people.
Yeah. I actually don't get that much of a high from winning. I mean, I do, of course I do, but it's for me, winning it's a very fleeting feeling, where it's a recognition that your hard work has paid off and that all the sacrifices that you've made, that they've been worth it. But for me, even when I've had my best results, am I truly happy? Maybe for a day, and then immediately it's how do I get, or this was when I was fencing, but it's true now in business as well. How do I get to the next level? What do I need to do? How do I stay where I am? How do I think about all the possible issues that could come up? So for me, it's just that momentary thing, and then I start worrying about the next problem.
Yeah, the mirror is sometimes the best teacher, and I think those fleeting moments of victory, it brings in, at least in my experience, maybe some type of not worry, but maybe the mirror isn't showing you exactly what you need to see.
Yeah.
And then when you suffer one of those losses, or something doesn't play out the way you expected or anticipated or wanted, the mirror is pretty clear if you're willing to look into it.
Yeah,
and
100%.
I really like that. That's definitely something that has been consistent across all of our guests, I think.
And everyone will tell you that you need to appreciate your success. You need to enjoy it. You hear that a lot, and it's true to some extent. But I think that all great athletes have a drive that really doesn't allow them to have that success kind of make them feel comfortable with where they're at. Yeah.
That's why Lee Kiefer keeps winning and getting better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that brings us into, and it's a perfect answer to segue us into our first segment, which is the why behind the win. And, we're talking about the winning feeling being fleeting. We're talking about, these losses being really clear indicators of what can improve and their motivators. That being said, you had a fairly long career. I mean, you started fencing at 6 and you're still fencing, but through your most competitive years, through NCAA fencing, through post-grad competing, it's a very long career. You had to continue buying in. You had to continue training, improving, refining. And after all that, you've stepped away multiple times to pursue what, people like to say, quote unquote, is real life stuff, right? And you
It's
continue.
all real life.
I know. That's why I quoted. That's why I was
Yes.
like, quote unquote. Actually, fencing might be more real, right? But really, handling things off the strip.
Yeah.
And yet you continue to return. So the question is, what sparked your fire then? What sparks it today? Is it the same? Is it different? And really, what drives the intent, the purpose? Why do you do this? This is such a niche sport. This is something that we all love. You and I quickly bonded over our passion for the sport, I think, and I think the way that we think. I enjoy having a lot of conversation with you about fencing and mentality and just in general. That being said, everyone might have a different driving force behind that passion. So if you mind articulating a little bit of that out, if you can, to Steven and I.
So in terms of the why, fencing is a really unique sport. And I was always an athlete growing up. I did a lot of sports, but when I kind of focused on fencing, it suits my personality in a lot of different ways. The combination of the tactical, the intensity of it, the strategic element of it, combined with the physical element of it, was always something that I thought was very unique. I love team sports, but as an ultra competitive person, I like my destiny to be under my own control and in my own hands. And in fencing, that you always have that opportunity. Even in team fencing, which I love, ultimately, your performance is based on your own results. So there's nowhere to hide, but at the same time, you can measure your success by your own efforts and your own results, which I liked a lot. And, in fencing, I think there's a lot of things that go into what makes a great fencer, right? I've thought about this a lot. I kind of think there's really, generally, I think of it as being 4 different kind of components. There's a tactical and technical element, there's a physical element, and there's overlap between them, but I view them as distinct. And there's a mental element. And all 4 of those, I think you can be a good fencer if you're excellent at 2 of them. You could probably be a really good or a great fencer if you're excellent at 3 of them, but to be an outstanding fencer, you have to have some degree of ability in all 4. And the mental side, tactical and mental, what's the difference? Right? Tactics, pure fencing tactics.
Right.
And that's a skill, and for some people it's more innate than for others, but you can develop that skill with practice. The mental element to me is something that some of it is innate, just how you do in competition, right? We all know people that you see them in practice and you think this person could never lose, and then they go to competition and they never get the results. Why, yeah. Right? And some people are the opposite, right? And so some people do well under pressure, some people don't. And there are also skills that you can do to get better in that area. The physical, that's something, again, that's somewhat innate. Some people are great athletes, better natural athletes, but you can also develop those things. So for me, I was, as a very competitive person, and also an obsessive person, I would say, for sure. I think most fencers are actually pretty obsessive. There was so much for me to think about that I was constantly, it was very all-encompassing and all-engaging for me. So it was always different aspects of the game that I could think about where I felt that I could get my level higher and I could outperform my peer group by trying to figure out how to excel in these different components.
Okay. And why today?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, actually, no, yeah, back to the original question, just in your pursuits today, do you feel that it's a similar drive, like that
100%, that
mastery of different components of
100%.
A game, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's 100%. I'm still, in my era, you kind of knew that when you graduated from college, unless you were training for an Olympic team, which was maybe a few years, you were going to have to start your career by your early mid-20s. There were very few of us that were actively training full-time into our late 20s or early 30s. And so, when coming out of I could talk later about how I got from fencing to my career, but definitely like a lot of that same approach to things that I had with fencing, thinking about how to excel in whatever I was doing, learning the lesson that's a long-term strategy, that basically you have to set goals and work towards them, that there's no overnight success, that there's going to be peaks and valleys, that there's going to be obstacles that you're going to need to overcome. All of that is equally true in the professional world. And I think that if you develop real skills in those areas and resilience to deal with intense adversity in hyper-competitive situations, I mean, that's really what a lot of business in my sector, which is real estate, it's hyper-competitive. There's a huge element of that. So I think to a lot of those skills are very applicable.
Yeah.
So most recently, you came back to fencing, I want to say in April or so, right around when I was healing up from my surgeries.
Yeah, brand new.
Yeah. Before that, if I'm not mistaken, your last time fencing was 5 years ago or 10 years ago?
So I stopped fencing for about 20 years.
Yeah.
And didn't miss it.
Mm-hmm.
My kids were young. They were not fencing. And it wasn't something, I mean, I looked back on my fencing career with fondness, but I was off, in the professional world. And one day I felt for the first time that I wanted to start fencing again. I don't know why. I had the itch to see if I could still do it. So I said to my wife, you know what, I kind of feel like fencing again. She said, really? I said, yeah. So I went to the New York Athletic Club and I started training a little bit to see if I could still do it without hurting myself, which is kind of iffy, and did it for a few months. I was training with some of the guys that you know, Dylan Nollner and James Call and those guys, excellent fencers, Ryan Griffith. And they were younger. I was an old guy there. I was in my mid-40s. I went to one veteran NAC and took third, renewed my A, and then said, I'm done. And I didn't fence again. And so then I thought I was really done. And now my son Levi, who has been fencing now for 3 years, is actively competing. I go with him to competitions. I never really thought about fencing anymore, but his coaches asked me if I would consider fencing on a vet team at nationals, this past nationals, and I said, yeah, let me see if I can still do it now. It had been about 6-7 years since I last fenced, and let me see if I enjoy it. And I started practicing a little bit with them and some veterans fencers at Cobra on Saturday practice, and I enjoyed it. So we had a great time at nationals. On the team event, it was Sergey Danilov and me and John Normile, who's a legendary Olympian, and my old teammate, and we had a blast. We took third, and since then I fenced in one other vet tournament. So now I'm enjoying it, and we'll see if I want to keep going to competitions.
That's awesome.
Very happy.
Congratulations.
Very happy to hear you found it again. Very happy to hear that you were able to cleanly put it down.
Yeah, totally put it down.
I think that's something that's hard for a lot of people to do. I'm looking forward, like if I project out my life for the next couple of years, I think I'm going to have a lot of trouble with that, is cleanly putting it down.
I think we're scared.
We're scared.
It's
terrifying.
It's a big change. And, sometimes you ease your way into it. I think I was basically done after 96, because the 96 Olympic cycle, I was in law school at the time. I had taken off a year and a half to train, to try to make the team, which I didn't end up doing. And that's a whole other story. And then I went back, I finished law school, and there were a couple of years where I was able to go to NACs and still compete at a very high level, maybe go to practice once or twice a week. And then it kind of cycled out a little bit. I think my last real competition was in 2000. Okay. But I think if you're replacing it, you need to replace it with something. You can't just be sitting at home staring at the TV, because for people who are that committed to something, I think it's really important that you find a new outlet for all of that energy.
Yeah, I can see why you might say that.
Otherwise, bad things happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nightmare.
So We definitely want to get in and speak more about the transition into professional life. I just had a couple questions about your earlier in your fencing career. This is our first mention of Aladar on the podcast, I believe.
Oh,
I believe so.
I believe
and if not, it's a worthy mention.
Well overdue.
Yeah.
And neither Ari nor I have had the pleasure of working with Aladar, or I don't know. Sorry. Speaking for you.
Okay?
Yeah, I just needed to clear my throat. Anyway, speaking for Ari, just not a crazy amount of interaction with him. We kind of came into New York and started coming to New York more as he was on the tail end of his coaching career. Can you tell us about him for the audience who might not know who he is, and just anything you feel like sharing really on this podcast for Ari and me as well?
Yeah, for clarification, my one interaction with him, other than just saying hello on occasion, was I told him I was really excited after I read his book, One Touch at a Time, for the first time. And I know that may or may not be his best book, but that is his most published book and most read book in the fencing community, at least in our generation. I said, Coach, I read your book. And he said, okay. And then he turned around and he walked the other way. and I was just in awe. Other than that, we just know him through many stories. And
Aladar can be an intimidating individual.
yeah, which is hilarious because he's all of 5'3", 5'6",
125 pounds.
Yeah, soaking wet. So yeah.
So Dr. Aladar Kogler is, I think, one of the absolute great fencing masters of the 20th century and 21st century. He came from Hungary, so he was born in Hungary. Under communism, he was a top-ranked national saber fencer in Hungary. When the Russians took over Hungary, he was forced to end his career, ultimately ended up moving to Czechoslovakia, where he became a fencing coach, was coach of the Czech national team, produced some world champion épée fencers, then defected to the United States in the 1980s, and first to Wayne State, where the coach at the time was Hungarian. Went to Wayne, and in the old days, NCAAs would take your top finisher in each weapon. It wasn't a team event. So Wayne State won the NCAAs his first year with his son fencing saber, his nephew fencing foil, and Rino Bianchi, another a very good Italian épée fencer fencing épée. He then went to Columbia, where he was the head coach, co-head coach for many decades. Aladar has produced multiple Olympians in foil, épée, and saber. So I think he's really one of the last great three-weapon coaches, men's and women's. Didn't matter. He probably has produced 30 to 50 Olympic fencers in his career. It's just unbelievable. And he was way ahead of his time in the 80s. He was already really integrating into his philosophy of fencing and life, the importance of the mental approach, the diet. He was a yoga practitioner. He was an early practitioner of transcendental meditation. And so he, in addition to just being an unrivaled technical coach from the kind of classic Hungarian school, he just was somebody who really understood all of the elements that go into making a great athlete, and also just how those skills apply to you as a person. And so he was a very stern man, but also incredibly warm. I mean, he has a legion of former students, myself included, who would, walk over hot coals for him. He was, despite his kind of reserved nature, he was somebody who gave really everything to his fencers. And if he knew that you would put in the effort yourself to get to the level that you wanted to get to, he was always there to kind of push you to that next level. And he's a Yoda-esque figure to a large cohort of great fencers.
Yeah, and one thing that I've noticed is everyone in the cohort that I know takes a lot of pride in the fact that they got to work with Aladar, and in not just that, also the teachings that he had passed along. And to my knowledge, I mean, I'm sure there are a few that fell through the cracks, but to my knowledge, the group that really worked with him for quite some time, all of them have little collections of learnings that they can still remember very clearly from him, whether it be just memories or, multiple people, multiple students that I know that have detailed notes and essentially mini textbooks of their learnings from this guy because they couldn't get enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think about principles I learned from Aladar on a weekly basis, and they don't relate to
Even
fencing.
during your time away.
100%. Yeah, they don't relate to fencing, but just things about controlling your emotions, about finding balance and being centered, about, I mean, even he was introducing techniques about breathing and, slowing down your breath, controlling how to use, meditating, how to kind of try to focus on, and what now you realize are mindfulness principles that are very common now in meditation, and kind of getting yourself out of your head, not ruminating so much in your head, how to kind of focus on the environment around you, how to really dedicate yourself to working towards goals. Like, these are all things that he instilled in all of us that really are life lessons that were vital when we were fencing, but just equally vital outside of life.
We should do a full-blown case study, like where are they now on just the Aladar cohort versus
There's a
everyone
lot
else?
of Aladar former students who've gone on to be very, very successful people in business, medicine, all sorts of things.
I don't think it's an accident.
No, definitely not. He was a real mentor to all of us.
That's awesome. To my knowledge, he's still alive. He's 92, I believe. And
I think he's 91 or 92.
no, I think he was 92 last I heard in July. But you might find this funny, you might not. Our chairman of the athletic club, yet another student of Aladar's, Michael Offrington,
Old friend of mine. Yeah.
wanted to meet up with Aladar and hang out, get lunch, whatever. And he was trying to plan ahead because in the New York way, as you know, probably better than Steven and I, people are very busy. People have plans weeks out, weeks in advance. So Michael was trying to plan out weeks in advance. It's June, right around July 4th. Let's get lunch. Aladar said, yeah, sure. And Michael showed me these texts. And Michael said, okay, well, do you want to pick a place? X, Y, or Z option. Something to that effect. And Aladar said, at the age of 92, one does not know what will come first, July 3rd or death. So reach out to me on July 1st.
That sounds like
And Michael was just laughing because he got this text, and he also, I'm sure, wasn't surprised to read it, but it's just, you can't not laugh because he's so, from everything that we've heard, he was just so matter of fact and calm in his delivery about anything.
Yes, 100%. And he was also he treated you like an adult, and so even when you were young, you felt that it was a collaborative process. I never saw Aladar yell at a student on the strip when he was coaching. He was always kind of encouraging you to, it was very important to him that you know how to really coach yourself when you're on the strip. And that's changed a lot in the modern fencing world where, coaches really kind of micromanage their students sometimes. But Aladar's approach was really to kind of help you become a real individual person and fencer. And so his relationship with his students, while we were all very devoted to him, I mean, there was something about the way that he treated you with respect and kind of as an adult that was very empowering to you as a young athlete. Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's definitely some lessons there just for, not just for the athletes, but for coaches. I think,
parents.
And for parents. I think we could all learn.
If any coaches or parents are listening to this, just listen to the last 30 seconds of Ben speaking one more time.
Yeah, that's been a big awakening for me coming back, watching my son, is that to see the over involvement of parents in the modern competitive fencing world. It's it's definitely often extremely excessive, and I think it is often to the real detriment of the fencer. Absolutely. Because you're under so much psychological stress as a fencer. Competition is a big stressor, and I think that especially if you aspire to have a long career, it's when you're doing anything for this much time and you're traveling and you're fencing for multiple times a week. I mean, there are definitely going to be periods where you get burned out, where it becomes more like a job, where going to practice is a drag, and kind of learning how to, and that's true in the professional world too, for the most part. Not every day you're going to, come whistling with a smile on your face. Learning how to kind of deal with that yourself is a very important life lesson. And I think having outside forces, kind of exogenous forces that are pressuring you with unnecessary stress, I think what it does when I see a lot of these people, I think to myself, these kids are going to be burned out in a few years.
They already are.
It's not fun,
They're probably burnt out as you're watching them.
I've heard from a lot of college coaches too that one of the big problems now for recruiting for colleges is that a lot of these coaches know that by the time these kids get into college, they're just fenced to get into college, and as soon as they get there, they're done. And so finding the students that really aspire, like you two, to kind of take it to the next level, the national team level, Olympic level. I mean, most of these kids have been doing it as a job with their parents looking over their shoulders since they were 8 years old. Why wouldn't they be burned out?
Right. Well, I mean, I just having interacted with some of the kids from my club back home, when I would go home for Christmas or summer breaks in college, hearing about like their tournament experiences, right? Because one of the things that kept me going for so long and that I loved was just when you would go to a competition and you were an unsupervised teenager with a bunch of other unsupervised teenagers, and you could go have fun, right? And explore and do things that not a lot of kids get to do.
100%.
And it was formative, and it was really impactful for, life lessons, completely unrelated, responsibility. The list goes on, but just fun. And my dad, and I'm very thankful for this, from the time I was 14, he was like, all right, like my value is no longer added here. You're going to go with your coach and, good luck. I'm not going to waste resources to go and be nervous and yell and watch you, because he's not a fencer. And
that was a very wise decision on his part.
Absolutely. And I'm very thankful for it. And I think it contributed a lot to my success and my enjoyment and longevity in the sport. And it's saddening to see that the experience of the younger fencers nowadays is not the same.
It's really interesting for me watching it from the outside, because parents were not involved when I was younger. I mean, my father was certainly involved in getting me started and supporting me financially and taking me to tournaments when I was a little kid. And he was amazing fencing dad. He sit out in the bleachers in the corner and look up when I was fencing. He didn't understand fencing. I think I was fencing foil. I think maybe he kind of understood right of way by the end. But he was not pressuring me in any way. My mother, is an amazing woman. I think she saw me fence twice, maybe in competitions. Once I remember I looked over her. I was losing 14-11 to make the finals of nationals. She was crying. She come to see me. I was like, oh my God. Just like, oh my. But it was very different. And I think that as a parent, one of the great blessings for your children is if they develop self-motivation, because then it comes from them. And as a parent, you want to take pride in your children's success and you want to help them. But I think it's really important to kind of not live vicariously through them, or just to put too much pressure on them because you have goals for them that may differ from their own goals.
Well, that definitely answers one of our later questions, which is, I'll read it to you, and you already answered it. Where is this question? You don't coach your kid, an up-and-coming junior fencer in the USA. What led you to what led to you passing him off to other coaches rather than coaching yourself? And I think that answers it right there, where it's like you want a distinction between your relationship with him and his relationship with the sport. And
I feel very lucky. And you've met.
He's very motivated. Talking about that
super
self-motivation, we both talked to him quite a bit last night. He loves feedback. He loves pushing himself to get better. He's got the energy. And, I think one of the reasons we like him is because we see his joy for the sport, his passion for the sport. And that comes, as you said, partially from him and probably partially from the environment that is cultivating this passion for him, where, the only things that he mentions about you and fencing are the piece of advice that you're giving him about meditation that he's seeking out from you.
Yes.
Right. So, or the advice that you're giving him that he's seeking out from you because you're a fencer that he's treating as a mentor, not a parent that's hovering around practice and the strip and all this stuff.
No, I decided that when he at a late age, at 14, which is in the modern world considered old, that he wanted to start fencing.
Grandfather.
My goal was to make sure that I found a good club for him that would have that environment where he could develop a peer group, and it was, he could have make friends and kind of.
And what club was that? Let's give him a little shout out here.
Yeah, I could give him a big shout out. NYFA, New York Fencing Academy. Misha has built an amazing club, and there's also Yadek and Sergey Danilov, who are the coaches there. They do a great job with the kids, and they're all great coaches, but they're also great guys. And I think they've managed to create an environment where the students really, it's really about the students kind of helping each other and working with the coaches. The parents are very hands-off at the club.
Yeah, as much as they can. Obviously, you can't control every parent.
No, 100%.
But I think they run a good club. That's my secondary club. I think we've named them once or twice on the podcast, but Misha is one of my current coaches, my primary coach, and Sergey Danilov, as you mentioned, he was my one of my original coaches at Alliance Fencing Academy. So I obviously have a lot of good things to say about NYFA. And back to the story. Thanks for the shout out. And Steven's a friend of the club.
I feel very fortunate that Levi ended up there with Misha. What I try to do with Levi is expose him to some of the things that it took me many years to develop that he wouldn't necessarily have access to or know about, like how to do things like meditation and how to think tactically. I mean, these are things that I hope will just kind of help expedite his learning process. So there's no real reason to reinvent the wheel. But in terms of the actual coaching, no, I stay very far away from it.
That's great. Yeah. So I have a question that I was really itching to ask. As someone who fenced in this like 90s era, and now you're coming back and watching it, maybe you're not on YouTube, studying the game or anything, but I'm sure you've watched some modern high-level épée bouts or foil bouts. How do you feel that the game has changed just from when you were doing it? Because I love watching bouts from that era. It's my favorite era of fencing. I think it's beautiful, and like I have my own thoughts on what's different about it. But as someone who lived it, what do you feel?
Someone who's gotten to fence, one of the potential, the greatest of all time fencer. You fenced Kolobkov in your time, right?
I did. Yeah, actually, one of my all-time great bouts was a loss. Fencing Kolobkov to make the 16 in the Paris World Cup. And I was winning 14-12. And then he beat me. I remember his coach came over and said something to him, and he took it up to 11, and I couldn't go past 10. But it was, it's I think about it because he's my favorite épée fencer, but there's other people from that era too. Arndt Schmidt is a great German fencer, and there's a whole bunch of them. And I think I've watched the current fencing, and I've thought to myself, how would someone like Kolobkov fare in the modern era? I think he would still be one of the great fencers in the world.
Absolutely.
So I don't think that the game of fencing has passed those people by. I think there are differences. I think that for sure the youth fencers are at a much higher level. And, so when I see people now in the cadet level and the junior level, some of it's because they've started fencing younger and as a result have been fencing competitively and training competitively for a much longer period of time. I think some of it's also because the game has just gotten more competitive, so there's more people doing it. Some of it, as people get older, I think, are modern approaches to nutrition and strength training that we just didn't have in our era. I mean, we were, if you were eating a power bar, that was considered to be like a vanguard thing to do, and drinking a Gatorade. Right? So now it's very different. So I think all of those things. When I watch the young American fencers right now, I think to myself that they would be wiping the floor with where most of us were at that age. But the top level fencing, in terms of how I see some of the differences, I mean, in épée, the game was somewhat slower, I think, because of we didn't have passivity rules back then. So if there was just a kind of a culture where if one guy was an aggressive fencer and one guy was a more defensive fencer, you would oftentimes
just fall into those roles.
Roles. So you'd see, 1-0 after the first period, or sometimes it would go to the third period and it would still be 0-0. I mean, like those things were kind of common. It was really interesting if you were a fencing aficionado to watch those bouts. As a spectator who didn't really understand fencing, it was probably a complete snooze, right? I think the technical aspect is, I don't think that it's more technical. Like, I don't think it's a higher level of technical ability.
I think it's gone down
than I saw.
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
I think it's gone down. I think the athleticism has gone up.
The
and
athleticism
the
has
gone down.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, because now I think maybe the distance has gotten a little closer, and in that distance, what are you going to care about more? The perfect line or parry, or are you caring about just hitting the guy before they hit you? And I think that's what I've seen. I've seen kind of this DIY-ness of some. I mean, there's still really beautiful fencing, and it still exists, and we all aspire to be beautiful, right? But I've just seen people kind of fall a lot more into their own, and it just like how well can you just get your opponent into a place where they're not at an advantage and you have an advantage, and you just commit.
Right.
And the really beautiful technical stuff, I think you see a lot more of in your generation. And a lot of those fencers, I think one of the reasons why you say like the game hasn't passed them by, I fenced you when you had no feeling when I was coming back from my surgery, and I already felt in some ways outclassed by your hand.
Far from it.
Well, I could hit you because I'm a better athlete than you, I hope, at the moment. And
no doubt about that.
There were other advantages that I had, but I already felt the dominance that your hand had, and I could see that. And I'm sure that it's only continuing to improve. And, other fencers of your time, Chris O'Loughlin, the first time I fenced Chris, not so long ago, he wiped the floor with me and then said, "Oh, you're really good." And I was like, I
had a similar experience.
I think he beat me like 15-8, and then he just immediately took off. And I said, "You're so good." I said, "No, yeah, ouch."
Chris is one of my old teammates, old friends, and a great fencer. Yeah.
So
it's interesting to watch. I mean, it's exciting. I thought a lot about this, and as I've been back, because we did not do well for the most part at the international level in my generation. And we started breaking into it in the next generation, guys like Seth Kelsey and Soren Thompson, great fencers. But I've thought about why is that? And some of it was we just didn't compete in the way that people do now. So for all of us, when you went to World Cups, you didn't really start going to World Cups until you were a junior. Maybe you would go to 1 or 2 a year. Senior World Cups, unless it was the Olympic year, you weren't really going to any of them because there wasn't any reason to. So we weren't really actively involved in the international scene. And in épée, it takes a long time to get to that level. So one of the concerns I have for the younger generation now is, they're the best in the world, right? Our cadets and our juniors, but can they continue that into the senior level? That's always been kind of the challenge, because they go off and traditionally get a job and, start their careers by the time they're 25, 26, maybe 30. And, you can compete at a high level in international épée. You probably don't really peak until you're close to 30
yeah.
or early 30s, right?
You're looking at 2 active participants in that case study right now.
Yeah. I mean, you guys,
We opted in.
you could have another 2 Olympic cycles easy if you wanted to compete at the highest international level.
Yeah.
But it's hard, because at a certain point, unless you're going to make a career in fencing, which is great, and there's more opportunities to do that now than there used to be, it just gets harder and harder.
Well, that segues perfectly into a question that I had, which is, you mentioned, I don't remember if it was on this podcast or just to us in passing or to me in another story, but you were kind of broke in your 20s trying to push to do this at the highest level. Why, and what was that like? Because so many people, and we are definitely wrapping up. I think we probably have a statement and our final segment left, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I think.
well,
Yeah, we'll feel it out. But, people like us, people like those kids you're talking about across all the weapons, we have amazing talents, like truly the most amazing talents. And we've shown that. We invest so much in these young kids. And, part of it could be coming from the wrong place, from the parents or the kids, whatever. But there's no doubt that some of those kids love the sport.
100%.
And the fear of pursuing it because they wouldn't be on this perfect path. You got an Ivy League education twice, and to hear that you're successful now, but to know that you were not quote unquote successful in that time shortly after is very scary for, I think, a lot of people to digest. This all-in mentality is really terrifying. And granted, times have changed, but still, I think the essence of what you did stays true. And we'd love to hear just a little bit about that and maybe how that went, and then tie that into maybe your transition out of the sport, or not out of the sport, but transition into, the professional life.
Well, one thing that competing at a high level in fencing definitely trains you for is jumping out of a plane without parachute. And that is a very important skill in life, where you have to commit to something without knowing how it's going to end, right? You're going to take off time to train for the Olympics. You're going to try to make a national team. You're going to come back from a serious injury. All of these things, you have to go through them, and you just don't know how the story is going to end, but you have to invest the time to try to see if you can get to that place. And that requires a lot of mental fortitude and a lot of resilience. And you have to be confident in yourself, but you also have to be realistic, right? And so those skills, like when I was in my 20s, I can remember, so the only real serious Olympic cycle that I trained for was 96. I was kind of bouncing around between foil and épée. 96, I had committed to épée, and at one point I was second on points. About 3 months before Atlanta, I broke my hand at a World Cup in Montreal in the top 32, and then I missed a number of World Cups. Some of the other guys did pretty well, and I ended up fifth on points that season. Right when I came back, I ended up winning the nationals that year. I won 3 NACs in a row, 2 NACs in nationals. So I finished that season, one of the top guys, but I didn't make the team. And I had taken off time from law school, and I was very depressed and in a dark place. So during Atlanta, I went down to North Carolina and went to the mountains of Asheville to a wood furniture making school, and spent 2 months learning how to make wood furniture, just to clear my head. And then I came back and I went to law school. And at that point, I knew that I wanted to commit to starting to build my career. So I kind of took the mentality that I had from fencing and shifted it over to trying to plan and strategize for it. I was in school, so it became, what job do I want to get? How am I going to work towards that job? What's the best route to take to get there in terms of internships and what kind of grades do I need to have? And I slowly started kind of applying that same philosophy that you apply to fencing. What are the weaknesses that I have? What's the end goal? How long is it going to take me to get there? What's realistic? And figuring out what are the routes that I can take to put in the effort to get me to that. And, there were twists and turns along the way. I changed careers. I went from law to business and different things happened. But I do think that throughout my career, it's like a shark, right? You got to keep swimming. And I've always had this kind of drive to know that I have to apply that same mentality. It's on me. I got to get there, and I just got to put in the work and and no one's going to think about it as hard as, no one's going to think about your life as hard as you. So, how do you kind of continually make sure that you're investing in yourself?
I like that a lot.
I like
100%.
Yeah, 100%, and brutally honest.
Yeah, no,
It won't be easy. I mean, you guys will have periods where, when you first make that transition, it's scary, right? It's scary. You're not going to know. Maybe you don't know yet what you want to do after fencing, or maybe you want to stay in fencing. But I will tell you that, I will tell you with 100% certainty that you cannot be at your level. You cannot be a really significant nationally ranked fencer without having developed the tools that will 100% be applicable to whatever else you're going to do in your life. 100%.
it's just on us to figure out what those tools are and how to apply them.
Yeah.
Well,
I think you laid some of them out already on this podcast, so we just have to listen back to it.
the harder you work, the luckier you get, right?
That's
So,
true.
you all will have periods where things come your way and times they don't, right? But I think that if you and one of the things I see with young people a lot is, and everyone likes to talk about, the young people don't work hard. But I see people like you, and younger than you, who are working incredibly hard. But I do think that in the social media world, everyone wants to get there quickly.
Right.
And because they see it and everyone thinks they're going to become an overnight success. But I see, with some of the young people that work with me now that I'm impressed by, having the ability to realize that to play the long game, and to realize that to get to where you want to be is an investment of time and effort. It's very, very important, because you don't always see that success right away, and you have to stay confident and in yourself that you're going to get there.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Success is found in the running of the race. Your planning, preparation, practice, and performance counts for everything. It's a quote from John Wooden, who is a very famous UCLA men's basketball coach. And I think that your answer to the previous question ties almost 100% into that quote.
Ari's giggling right now that he put that in there.
I
He's
did
so
put that,
happy right now.
It just worked perfectly. I had a feeling Ben would be talking about something that related to that quote. So we have one final segment.
But before the final segment, Stephen, do you mind shouting out?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. So we have to take a moment to shout out a really cool nonprofit organization that has been brought to our attention. Fencing for a Purpose is a nonprofit founded by 3 young fencers who want to share their passion for fencing with communities that would otherwise be without the sport. The organization has engaged many high school fencers across the country with the intent of giving back and paying it forward with officers all over the country. They run camps in underrepresented communities. They tutor international fencers in English. They raise money and donate gear in order to support grassroots clubs and provide a better experience for grassroots fencers. So we've been made aware and know some people very involved in this nonprofit, and we wanted to take a moment, use our platform to shout this out. The link will be in our bio if you're interested in donating to the GoFundMe.
or the description of the video.
Yeah, that's probably a good
And,
place to put it too.
and their Instagram is at fencing for a purpose. So give them a look, see if you want to get involved. And there's a GoFundMe link as well. So yeah,
Nice.
thanks.
Thank
All
you.
right.
So our final segment, we call it One Light Answers. So these are off the top of your head. No need to think too deeply about it. Just questions, rapid fire. So hope you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right. Who are your two favorite fencers all time?
Pavel Kolobkov and Shrecky from France.
Oh, great answer.
That's a good one. All right. What's the favorite city of yours that you've been to for fencing?
Budapest.
Also great
It's not
answer.
the first time we've heard that one. That is a classic fencing city.
It is a very classic fencing city, and Hungarians are near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
Mine too.
Me too.
What's something in your fencing equipment bag that probably shouldn't be in there? Or maybe formerly in there?
Old socks,
How old?
very old. They always seem to show up. Even
Do they
though I
stand
think-
on their own?
Yeah, I could hit somebody over the head with one.
Yeah. Who's the most challenging bout that you've ever fenced in practice or competition?
I would say a recent inductee into the U.S. Fencing Hall of Fame, Jim Carpenter.
Okay.
All right.
Jim had Jim was a great fencer, coach at Stevens for many years, finalist at Heidenheim, and had an absolute force field hand that was always a challenge for me to get through.
Also an Aladar Kogler student.
Also an Aladar student, yes.
We were talking last night at the AC, and they were saying, like, I came down here and Normile was fencing Carpenter and Atkins was fencing next to him against Simmons. Like, it was a throwback. So next question. What prepares you better for a career in real estate, foil or épée?
Epee,
Ooh, let's go. Okay.
more tactical.
Between Steven and Ari, who do you think is more fit to run your company?
I don't know yet. Let's see how the season goes.
All right, deal.
Okay.
Final question. What's your favorite piece of Prieur equipment?
The glove. I think they make an excellent glove.
Shout
our
out the
glove?
Prieur glove. Is it? Oh, we got it.
Yeah, I actually think that that's the best glove that's on the market right now.
So do we.
We agree. We have a post on Instagram we'll show you after this interview's over.
So yeah,
All right. Well, Ben, thank you so much for coming onto the show, agreeing to be a part of the show. Apologize that, fencers, we like to talk about fencing, and it was very fencing dominant. Hopefully in the future, if, you didn't hate this, we'd love to have you back on, hear more about your journey, about your career.
Sure.
And just chat more. But
Sure.
really appreciate the insights.
I'd love to.
And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, Ben.
pleasure. Yeah,
This
thanks,
was
guys.
awesome. Yeah, thanks for coming on. First vet fencer, first quote unquote former competitive fencer, first business professional on the show, and I think this went super well. And
You know what? I will say one last thing about being in vet fencing. One thing I've realized since I came back, I don't care how I do, but I mean, of course I do, but I'm not doing it for results or anything anymore. But I do realize since I'm back that fencing was one of the only things in my life where I could actually get into the zone, which is an incredible feeling. And even in business success or in the business world, you don't really replicate that. And so having the ability to access that again, that's something that's I've really enjoyed.
the flow state.
The flow state. Yeah.
Well, welcome back to the flow state, Ben.
That's fun. Yeah. I realized that I missed that now that a couple times I've managed to get back there.
I'm gonna miss it too. Cheers to never stopping.
Anyways, thank you so much for joining us. This was great, and you have so much knowledge and so many memories to share, and I'm glad that we got to extract some of them. And maybe the next time it will just be stories based, because I know you have a lot, and
A lot of stories.
we just we're grateful that you came along, and as we evolve, we'd love to have you back.
My pleasure. I'm glad you guys are doing this. This is great.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. Thank you, Prieur, for all that you do. Without you, we wouldn't be able to have episodes like this one, and we really appreciate your support.
Don't forget to follow, like, share, and subscribe to see more episodes just like this.